The clip I'm about to play for you is 2 minutes long. It may feel like the longest 2 minutes of your life, but stick with me here. Get commentary and analysis afterwards. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that her reasons for getting involved with veganism, her reasons for becoming vegan, are entirely detached and rational, whereas her reasons for leaving veganism, her reasons for becoming an ex-vegan, have to do with desire, and it's a sense of desire that she asserts as biologically, innately real.
I'll just dive straight into things. I became a vegan, like 4 years ago, and I was driven by environmental sustainability and climate change. Reasons for becoming a vegan at that time, I was getting my undergraduate degree in environmental science and anthropology, so it was like emergence of like society and humans with the environment, and like the main focal point where I researched was on food systems, and I concluded that the current food system and where we get our food and how food is produced and the animal abuse associated with that is unacceptable, and I transitioned into a vegan lifestyle. So I was like trying everything that I possibly could to avoid switching out of veganism, and got my blood work done, and you would think that vegans are normally deprived and stuff, but I wasn't. My iron was on point because I eat so many greens, and my hemoglobin was good, my B12 obviously was on point, like everything was good. The only issue was the low blood pressure. And finally it was like, okay, I can't keep living with like coming in and out of like consciousness in a way and blacking out multiple times in the day. So I introduced fish and eggs. I just kind of like lived with it and have been living with it until about 1 month ago, when I was at the grocery store with my partner, and we both, like the chicken both kind of caught our eyes, and he was like, wouldn't chicken be so good? I was like, yeah. I have so many mental barriers to eating animal-based foods, and I have so much guilt around introducing animal foods back into my diet. But then it was just, when the chicken option came up, it was like, I really want this. It was something like physiological. But the chicken was amazing. It was so good. I was like, what is this heaven? And since then, I have been having chicken about once every 4 to 5 days, and my low blood pressure symptoms have virtually vanished.
Disclaimer. I am not a Christian. I am in fact a very vocal atheist. I identify as a nihilist. However, I can recognize that Christian culture and Christian civilization provided people with a certain kind of education and awareness in a certain finite set of themes that is now bit by bit disappearing from our society. So some things that were not just familiar, but overly familiar just a generation and a half ago are now becoming obscure and hard to understand for a new generation growing up in a much less Christian society. One example of that is the mentality of desiring the forbidden fruit. Objectively, a woman is no more attractive, no more appealing, no more sexy when she's dressed up as a nun than when she's wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. And yet, it was an incredibly widely attested factor in our culture, in our society, in the West, that up until quite recently, there were all of these men with an erotic fascination having sex with a woman dressed up as a nun. Now, why would that be? They were raised in schools, very often including high school, where there were nuns who were their teachers and superiors, who often were mean to them, who often beat them with a ruler, who spanked them with a ruler. They grew up with these kind of oppressive figures dressed up as nuns, females, who were by definition both forbidding and forbidden. They were a symbol of authority, they were a symbol of something unattainable, and of course they might imagine that underneath the nun's uniform these women were tremendously beautiful or attractive. There were a lot of people who grew up with that sexual fascination, and then it was exhibited in a kind of lifelong fetish. So this was something Western civilization was not just aware of, but I think everyone was quite bored of hearing about. I knew a man who actually was sentenced to prison briefly. He was actually sentenced to prison because he was a peace protester. He was an anti-military protester, put it that way. But anyway, he was sentenced to prison briefly as a young man, and he had a lifelong fascination with having sex with women in police uniform. And he once had sex with a woman who was a judge in her judge's uniform, in the judge's robes. It's not deep, but it's real. I mean, this kind of fetishism, this kind of response to forbidden fruit, again, it's something that just a generation ago people would have been so familiar with, they would have found it boring to discuss. And yet today, I think it's interesting that we see this phenomenon of, anti-veganism playing out. It seems to me all the players in the game, including pro-vegan critics, they really seem to be unaware of how powerful this type of desire is, and how people, rationally or irrationally, like either thinking it through rationally or without any such steps taken in the mind, they will really assert that their own desires are in fact innate biological needs. This is the most common thing in the world. You want something, but you'd rather believe that you need something, right? You actually have a very fetishistic and kinky reason why this woman dressed up as a nun is more attractive to you, but you want to think it's something natural and necessary and innate and good, because you don't want to question psychologically why it is you perceive it this way, why it is you experience it this way, right? Now, in terms of objective scientific facts here, women who actually choose to become nuns, not if you pay a stripper to dress up like a nun, also common to pay strippers to dress up as police officers and so on, all these other authority figures, all right? There is no objective sense in which a woman who is a nun is more attractive than any other woman. In the same sense, can we all just agree here, objectively, chicken does not taste good? I'm vegan, okay, but I remember the taste of chicken. White chicken breast, okay, there's a bit of a greasy taste to it, and then otherwise it's just salt and it's flavorless. Chicken has an almost neutral flavor. It almost tastes like nothing aside from the salt, and massive amounts of salt are added to it, and to some extent the grease or the oil if you're having chicken that's cooked in a method that adds a lot of oil and grease to it, right? We know this. There's really a sense in which you can even measure what does chicken taste like. And why is it that in our culture, and in all cultures, all of these sauces and spices and oily batters have to be added to chicken to make it taste like anything at all? All right? This young woman just described to you vividly how she had this response to seeing chicken. She had this response to the flavor of chicken. And she then makes the leaps of inference that this was a cure for her medical problems. And it does sound like in her case she had legitimate medical problems, but eating chicken is not the cure, or eating chicken is not the best or the only cure. If you have low blood pressure, there must be a better way to deal with it than eating foods you know to be unhealthy, but that can raise your blood pressure. Fried chicken as the cure for low blood pressure. What a concept. You should get a peer-reviewed paper on that. This is really ridiculous, right? But I'm inviting you here to focus on and really think about the mentality of forbidden fruit. What is it that made the chicken seem so fascinating? What is it that made it taste so sweet? It was precisely the sense of it being forbidden. It was precisely, as she said, her own sense of guilt, of challenging that guilt and overcoming those inhibitions. Millions of people are fascinated with that stuff. And I gotta say, I feel qualified to speak on it because I feel none of it. To me, there is absolutely nothing that makes, for example, a Muslim woman wearing the headscarf and veil, that makes her more appealing than a woman in blue jeans and a t-shirt. Nothing. The fact that it's forbidden, the fact that it's mysterious, does nothing for me. All right? My life is about real relationships with real people on the basis of real self-knowledge and real mutual knowledge and real friendship and real common ground. I want a woman I can relate to as an intellectual. I want a woman, all the things I want have nothing to do with this kind of fetish for the unknown, fetish for the unattainable, fetish for the forbidden and the forbidding. I don't fetishize authority figures anyway. I don't relate to any of it. So I feel like I'm standing back with a sense of perfect attachment here. And it's the strange thing that in 2020, within the sort of vegan demimonde, it seems to me that I'm the only person pointing this out and saying, wait, these people, these ex-vegans, for the most part, they joined veganism for these very rational, very detached reasons that they can explain in so many words in a narrative form, right? And then they drop out of veganism for reasons that are wildly incoherent, that have everything to do with passion over reason, that have everything to do with desire overcoming their minds. And if we go back to the first premise in the case of this woman, so you think, all of a sudden, you think chicken tastes great when it has this forbidden quality, when, you're overcoming the years of guilt and your ideological commitment. Oh, really? So tell me something. Your entire university education in ecological science and anthropology, is that worthless now? All the facts and figures that you knew and shared with the world and cared about ecological devastation, is that all meaningless now? Is that what desire means to you? Or is it the case that your fetish has to take a step further, that you have to convince yourself that this fetish you're indulging in is a physiological necessity, that meat is actually a medicine that cures this mysterious illness you made up in your own mind that you have? You have to take those further steps precisely because of this gulf between what you rationally know, what you're ethically committed to, and, frankly, what turns you on.
So make sure you give this video a like and make sure that you subscribe to my channel. I would be very grateful. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll see you guys next time.